You know that simple tap or swipe of your credit card? It feels completely instant, right? Almost like magic. But behind that seamless little moment is a massive, invisible machine and a multi-billion-dollar fight over who exactly has to pay for it all. So let me ask you this. Have you ever really stopped to wonder who's footing the bill for your credit card rewards? You know, your points, your airline miles, all that cash back. It doesn't just materialize out of thin air. Today, we're going to follow the money and find out exactly where it comes from. All right, let's dive right in. In those few seconds it takes for that approved message to flash on the screen, a surprisingly complex and totally invisible process kicks into high gear. It's like this high-speed data relay that decides who gets paid what and how much. What's really fascinating is that most of these transactions run on what the industry calls the four-party model. This is basically the blueprint for networks like Visa and Mastercard, and it means there are four key players working behind the scenes on every single swipe you make. So let's trace the journey of a single purchase, step by step. It all starts when you tap your card. Instantly, the merchant's terminal zaps the details over to their bank, which is called the acquirer. The acquirer then passes it along to the card network, think Visa or Mastercard, which acts as the central traffic cop. The network then pings your bank, the issuer, to ask, hey, does this person actually have the money? Once your bank gives the thumbs up, it settles the payment with the merchant's bank, after taking a small fee, of course. And finally, the merchant gets their money, also minus a fee. And the crazy part? This all happens in the blink of an eye. So just to recap the Visa and Mastercard model, you've got two different banks, one for the store and one for you, that are connected by that network in the middle. Now, this is different from a three-party model like American Express, where one single company does everything. They act as your bank, the merchant's bank, and the network all rolled into one. Okay, so now that we've got a handle on how the machine works, let's get back to our big question. Where in that whole chain of events do the fees that actually fund your airline miles and cashback come from? And the answer, my friends, is something called the interchange fee. You might also hear it called the swipe fee. This right here is the most important piece of the puzzle. It's a fee that the merchant's bank has to pay to your bank on every single transaction you make. This fee is literally the economic engine of the entire credit card system. And the scale of this is just, wow, it's staggering. In 2021 alone, businesses in the US paid a grand total of $137.8 billion in these card processing fees. That is a massive cost of doing business that, has to be absorbed somewhere. So where does all that cash go? Well, the total fee a merchant pays is called the merchant discount rate. And as you can see, the lion's share of that, we're talking somewhere between 70 and 90%, is that interchange fee that goes directly to your bank, the one that issued you your card. Now, what's the official justification for these fees? Well, they're supposed to cover all the costs of running the system, things like maintaining the cards, managing the risk of fraud, and extending credit. But, and this is the part you really need to remember, they are also the primary source of funding for your credit card rewards programs. The rule of thumb is, the more generous the rewards on a card, the higher the interchange fee is going to be. And that, right there, brings us to the central conflict. For decades, merchants have been arguing that these swipe fees, which are set by the card networks, are just way too high, and that there's no real competition. And this hasn't just been a friendly debate. It has exploded into a massive 20-year-long legal war. Seriously, this fight has been a marathon, not a sprint. It all kicked off way back in the early 2000s with a giant class-action antitrust lawsuit. Through the 2010s, there were all these attempts to settle the case, but they were either shot down by the courts or flat out rejected by the merchants themselves. And that brings us to today, where a landmark settlement is finally on the table, aiming to end this decades-long war once and for all. But is the war really over? Well, not if you ask the merchants. The National Retail Federation came out and called this new settlement mere window dressing. Ouch. So why are they so angry? Because they argue it doesn't solve the core problem. Visa and Mastercard still get to set these fees without any real competition, which leaves merchants totally powerless to negotiate. So what's actually in this proposed deal? It introduces some really big changes that could honestly reshape the whole checkout experience for all of us. Okay, let's break down the key parts. First, and this is huge, the honor all cards rule is gone. This means a merchant can now refuse to accept certain types of cards, like those fancy premium rewards cards that have really high fees. Second,
Merchants can now add a surcharge if you want to use one of those more expensive cards. And finally, the deal includes a pretty tiny temporary reduction in the average swipe fee. We're talking just 1/10%, and it freezes those rates for 5 years.
Now, to really understand why this is such a big deal, just look at this. A whopping 85% of active credit cards in the US offers some kind of reward. So, giving merchants the power to say no thanks to these cards or to charge you extra for using them, yeah, that could fundamentally change how we all pay for things. All right, let's get to the bottom line here. What does all of this mean for your wallet? For the prices you pay every day, and for all those points you've been carefully collecting? How is this actually going to affect you? Well, in the pretty near future, you might start seeing new fees tacked onto your bill if you choose to pay with that high-reward credit card. Or you might walk into your favorite local coffee shop and find out they no longer accept that premium travel card you love so much. The choice at checkout is about to get a lot more complicated. But hold on. The story doesn't end with this settlement, not by a long shot. There's another battle brewing in Congress right now called the Credit Card Competition Act. The whole idea here is to force the biggest banks to give merchants at least 2 different network choices for processing a transaction, not just Visa or Mastercard. The goal, in a nutshell, is to inject some real head-to-head competition into the system. And if we look even further into the future, this entire system could be turned on its head by new technologies. We're seeing the rise of what are called new payment rails. You can think of them like brand new digital highways for money, like the Lightning Network, which is actually built on Bitcoin. The goal of these new techs is to bypass the traditional card networks completely, making payments faster, cheaper, and more direct all over the world, kind of like sending an email instead of a letter. Which leaves us with the ultimate question. Will all these changes, from settlements to new laws to brand new technology, finally create real competition and lower prices for everybody? Or will it just lead to more fees, more complexity, and a whole lot of new confusion at the checkout? One thing's for sure. The next time you go to pay for something, you'll know you're standing right in the middle of an industry on the brink of a massive transformation.